Başkanım söz sizde.
Ee, Değerli hocalarım, değerli meslektaşlarım, öncelikle bu toplantıya hoş geldiniz. Millet tabii yaz günü olunca biraz zaman uzuyor. Önümüzdeki süreçte bu katılımın artacağını düşünüyorum. Bugün webinar toplantılarımız tabii 2020'de özellikle pandemiyle birlikte yaşamımıza girdi. Sıklıkla artık uzaktan erişimli toplantılar gerçekleştiriyoruz, sunular yapıyoruz, çalıştaylar düzenliyoruz. Bu kapsamda bugün de yurt dışından bir misafirimizi ağırlıyoruz. Van Dijk'i bugün bizlere özellikle deprem risk yönetiminde yeni araçları aktaracak. Hasan Bey sağ olsun bu konuşmayı ayarladı. Ben diyalogumuzu o sağladı. Kendisine herkesin huzurunda teşekkür ediyorum. Umut ediyorum güzel, verimli bir şey olur, sunu olur. Biz de özellikle farklı bakış açılarının bu depremlerde nasıl sonuçlar verdiğini burada görme şansımız olur diye düşünüyorum. Tabii ülkemiz için Kahramanmaraş depremleri acı bir olay. 50 yani açıklanan rakamlar arasından bakıldığında 51 bini aşkın insanımız yaşamını yitirdi. Yine 310 binin üzerinde bina ya yıkıldı veya ağır hasar görmüş durumda. 1,5 milyon insanımız evsiz, barksız kaldı. Çok sayıda enerji tesisi, altyapı tesisi de bu depremde zarar gördü. 150 milyar dolar civarında da bir ekonomik kaybın söz konusu olduğunu biliyoruz. Bilim camiası açısından da gerçekten ilginç, peşi sıra 2 tane 7'nin üzerinde deprem meydana geldiği bir alan olduğunu, özel bir jeolojik alan olduğunu biliyoruz. Farklı bakış açılarının burada yaptığı çalışmaları anlatması bizler için önemli olduğunu düşünüyorum. Ben bu vesileyle konuğumuza tekrar hoş geldin diyor. Güzel bir sunu, güzel bir akşam olmasını diliyorum. Sizler de katıldığınız için hepinize teşekkür ediyorum. Hasan Bey belki hocamızı tanıtırsa ve bilgi aktarırsa sevinirim. Buyurun Hasan Bey.
Tabii. Hüseyin Bey çok teşekkür ederim. Öncelikle
Hasan Bey biz de sizi tanıyalım. Kameranız kapalı.
Açayım kameramı.
Bir sıkıntı olmazsa. Evet,
beni
buyurun.
görebiliyor musunuz? Görebiliyor musunuz
görüyoruz.
beni?
Evet, tabii. Buyurun.
Tamam. Benim ismim Hasan Güney. 92 Hacettepe mezunuyum. İşte 2000 yılında da Türkiye 96-99 yurt dışı master'ım var. Yani Amerika Colorado School of Mines'ta. 2013 arası Türkiye Petrol'ünde jeoloji mühendisi olarak çalıştım. Petrol arama mühendisi olarak. 2003'ten beri de işte 2 yıl önce özel bir şirkette çalıştım Türkiye'de. Sonra son 8 yıldır da Dubai'de Dragon Oil'da arama jeoloğu olarak çalışıyorum. Janpieter Bey benim iş arkadaşım. 5 yıl beraber çalıştık. Ondan sonra kendisi yapısal jeologtur. Structural geologist. Aynı yani dünya genelindeki plaka tektonikler olsun, aktif tektonik zonlar olsun çok güzel araştırmalar var, çok güzel yayınlar falan var. Bu Türkiye depremi olunca da bayağı ilgilendi. Ben de şöyle bir katkı sağladım ona. İşte Türkçe yayınlanmış yayınlar özellikle. Çünkü ona veri lazım. Kendin geliştirdiği bir software var. Bu software içinde veri lazımdı. Ben özellikle yerli kaynaklardan çok destek verdim kendisine. Özellikle haritalanmış fayları sağlamada, data sağlamada fayda sağladım ona. O da bunları derledi, topladı ve işte ileride olabilecek yani pre-estimation yapabilecek fayların için kendi software'ine uyguladı ve bunları bizimle paylaşacak. Bunun için kendisine teşekkür ediyorum. Bayağı bir emek sarf etti. Umarım bu uyguladığı metot belki biz yani Türkiye'deki deprem araştırmacılar için de bir ışık olur. Belki bir yol gösterici olur. faydası olur düşüncesindeyim. Hepiniz için katıldığınız için teşekkür ederim. Ben sözü Janpieter'e vereceğim. Janpieter, I did just quick introduction for your brief history, your background.
Thank you.
So I told them you are my colleague. You are my colleague. So my contribution to your presentation, I just pass out Turkish documents, some Turkish publication to you, and then you edited this data and compiled this for this presentation. Now it's up to you. You can just briefly introduce yourself and then start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Hassan. Thank you, everybody, Hussein, for this, let's say, occasion. So my name is Janpieter. I have something like 30 years of experience in different kinds of projects worldwide. I worked a lot of years for the Italian company ENI. I worked for Dragon Oil in Dubai, where I met Hassan Guni. We became friends. And I published quite some research papers on different things. I'm, let's say, interested in many aspects of geology. In this case, we are talking about something I am busy with since many years, which is the analysis of fractures and faults in different areas. Everybody who wants to know more about me can look into my LinkedIn profile and especially my ResearchGate space, where you can download papers and contact me for anything you would like to know more about regarding the things I've been busy with. So today I'm trying to, let's say, give a short overview of what I've been doing after the earthquake happened in Turkey. Sort of an idea came up to apply some technology that we know from oil and gas, from energy, let's call it like this, subsurface work, and apply this same technology to what we can see in the surface geology, and maybe see if it can help understand some aspects of the mechanisms and let's say damage control, risk management related to the earthquake. So let's say this is an example of something that could be something new we can use in the future. Let's see if I can.
Janpieter, before present, for attention to the audience, could you please stay in mute mode that we can eliminate the echo at the background? Mute, please, all the participants.
Oh, all participants need to mute. Do I need to
because there's an echo at the background.
Okay. You just tell me if I also need to do something, huh? But I think I can.
Keep going. You are fine.
Okay. I will just speak slowly, so if there is an echo, I just wait for the echo to stop. So this is the agenda. I try to compress it in 1/2 an hour. So and maybe later we have also some time for questions and talk about different things. So first of all, some considerations and introduction. Huh? Let me see how I can make my presentation work, because okay. So let's say that the earthquake itself, the earthquakes, they need little introduction. I think most of the people that are in the audience today, they know much about it, probably even more than myself. Two large earthquakes happened on February the 6th. For people who are connecting from abroad, maybe they also saw a lot about it in the news. It is a worldwide event. Lots of damage, victims, terrible episode. Let's put it like this, in the history of humanity. So it is important that we try to take a closer look at what we can do and what we can learn. Many of these pictures that I show, you are familiar with. They circulated already in the internet. We see here the area, the plates that collide, Arabian, African, Anatolian, Asiatic plates that bump into each other, and in the area where the earthquake occurs, mainly we see sinistral slip along the larger fault zones that have actually also shown earthquakes in the past. So I'll just give you a few pictures to get a little bit familiar with the earthquake, although these are things that we all are familiar with already. First of all, on this presentation, I would like to make a disclaimer, a few disclaimers. You can see here the pictures that show the displacement, east, west, north, south, from different satellite images, the energy intensity, however we want to express it, of the two earthquakes. Many things were, of course, presented and analyzed. So let's say my first disclaimer, it is very important that what I present here is a methodology, is of course, no way a replacement of existing method. It is just an addition to obtain a better understanding of the mechanisms and to help manage the risks. Maybe we can do something more, just try to understand and add some additional analysis. And the second disclaimer I would like to do, Hassan already explained it to you, that say the calculations that I have been doing here, they have been done on data that are available and published by many very well-known ex-specialists, most of the people, of course, Turkish geologists. So I have not done any new fault interpretation for this study. I base myself on all the good work that has been done in the past. Also to give you deliberately a sort of an idea that we can already use a lot of information that we have. We have so much already available and so much work has been done already. Sorry, I have to forgot to close my phone. Good. So let's go to the next one. Okay. Also, I thank Hassan very much. We collected many pictures circulated in the net about the damage that we can observe in the surface. Many faults, offsets, and there are reports now issued on all these phenomena and these, let's say, damages we can see all over the area, and to give us a flavor of how the strain, let's say, how the deformation related to the deeper shock is distributed in the surface. And one example that I myself thought a lot about, and I think many people debated also on this one, it is sort of maybe a sort of a symbolic damage that is interesting to use as a mind, something in our mind to understand what is the use of knowing how faults, smaller faults, are also oriented. It is a little bit deliberately provocative, because if you see on the right side, we see this railroad. Everybody looked at it and was astonished how it bended. Many debates on engineering issues, etc. And on the left, we see a picture I circulated myself to show that if the railroad would have been oriented differently with respect to the fault, it would have deformed in a different way. Okay, maybe for many geologists this is quite obvious, but for many people this is not so much. And okay, in the case of this railway, we don't want to move it, we want to keep it there. But in the case of buildings, you can understand that if we have a feeling of how small faults are oriented and how they can displace, maybe we can mitigate on the way we construct all kinds of buildings and facilities. So that is a flavor of the earthquake and the things we have been seeing. This is an anticipation of the results of this study, just to give you already some flash. You saw it also in the banner. We can make maps of density, orientations, and on a smaller and a larger scale with this technology that we call FPDM, fracture potential and domain mapping. So my presentation basically talks about how do we come to this sort of output. So let's first take a look at the philosophy of fault and fracture modeling, what is actually in this fault and fracture modeling that can give us a flavor on how we can handle this information. Okay, three basic tools I have been working on myself and that help us, FMX. So let's say the analysis of the information that we have available from a smaller scale that you see on the left to a larger scale that we see on the right. So first of all, we need to have a lot of tools available to get the mathematical imprint of this information in expressed in formula and graphs. The density of things, the orientation of the things, how they vary in space and over scales. The thing I have been working on myself a lot, but this is not the argument of this talk, is DMX. It is the way we model in 3 dimensions faults and fractures. But let's say this is out of the scope of what I'm going to show you today. Today we focus on the left part, which is FPDM, which is the domain modeling, how the things vary in space. So we take a look at 2 specific properties of fractures, which is the size and how they are distributed in space, which gives us then the density variations and the orientation of the fractures, how they vary in space, fractures or faults. So, and all these technologies, they can be applied in oil and gas, hydrology, geothermal, mining, etc. And here we see today something where we apply them in risk management. Okay, so where do we basically get our data from fractures and faults? Where do they come from normally? Let's go from left to right, to smaller to larger scale, from cores, in civil engineering and in energy and oil and gas. We see fractures in cores. We can see them in image logs. Also in mining and in civil engineering, we use image logs in the surface. Outcrops, of course, we see them with the eye. And slowly we're going to larger scales. But on the smallest scale, we also see them in thin sections, very small ones. So let's say everywhere we look, in the larger scale, in the seismic and in remote sensing, in the satellites, everywhere we look, we see fractures and faults. How come? Why is this so? Because fractures and faults, basically, they are a feature of nature which is present on all kinds of scales continuously. But all these instruments, they have limitations. We cannot see everything with each instrument, and we only see a small window of what is actually present. This image, you can find it in my papers. I keep on showing it in my presentations. From the left, we see the big mountain, and on the right, we see smaller. We see this mountaineer who's climbing there, and he gets. We come closer to him. In the end, we see the smaller fractures. So here are a few words like observation area, resolution, average length, and density that change slowly when we go from the larger to the smaller scale. We look at a bigger area, but we see more things. So the density is higher and the resolution is higher. But you can try it out yourself. You walk from a fractured mountain, you will go closer. You can slowly you see more things, but basically in sort of a way you see the same things but on a smaller scale. So in the instruments we use is seismic and image logs, core, thin section, satellite outcrop. So each instrument we see a little window of this reality. And we give them different names. Here we call them highly persistent fractures and faults. In the middle here we see them also. Then we start to call them joints and highly persistent fractures. Here we call them microfractures and joints. So basically all these things, they are part of a big family which is present all over the place. And different sort of things like microfractures and joints and faults, they are present on different scales, but they overlap. They are part of one large texture. So mathematically, there has been a lot of work. This is old pictures from the 90s, but they're still valid, and we see them in different ways presented by people. sort of a way, if we go and look from the left, a small scale, to the right, a large scale, this is logarithmic, so from millimeters to kilometers, we see the amount of features. If we plot both scales in logarithmic, so by logarithmic, we see normally like straight lines. The amounts of features, they dramatically collapse to very few things on the larger scale and many things on the small scale. But if we look at the aperture, how open are they and how more do they displace? And so opening or shearing, how much strain they absorb. We can see that if you go per feature from the smaller to the larger scale, the small ones, they displace, each one is only very small displacement. Larger scale, each one is big displacement, but there are very few. So if you look at it in a complete image, you see something like this. Here we have the veins, billions and billions of veins in 1 kilometer, but only one, maybe dike, something that is a big feature, a big crack, which opens on the larger scale, few. And in the case of faults, we see a line that is a lower slope, because faults basically they open less. They open they move in mode 2 or 3. So they have this kind of connection. Mathematically, this is a power law function with an exponent and a coefficient. Sometimes people talk about fractals. Fractal, the word already contains the word fracture. If these lines have specific slopes, certain relationships, certain coefficients here, they will make the system fractal. But it doesn't mean that each power law is fractal. So this is something which is in the system, and it means that if we look at a small window at a certain scale in the system, we can predict the other scales of the system, because they are connected. The properties of what we see on a certain scale, they are similar to the properties that are of a scale that we do not observe, which is, for example, a smaller scale. So we can use, for example, a satellite image to understand how is the smaller faults, how they are distributed. This is, of course, only a general statement. I already published some papers to show that we have to be very careful with this, because if we go to the different scales, we see different things and they sometimes change properties. But they are all connected in some way. Good? Now, that is sort of ideas on fracture networks. Now, what is this FPDM? What is this fracture potential and domain mapping? Okay, this is the slide with many words. The only slide I have with a lot of words. Let's see if we can just read it out. The FPDM is a protocol that consists of a series of tools. So it is like many programs together, they work together. And it examines the fracture assemblage. And normally we use 2D lines on a plane. So like an outcrop image with fractures, or a satellite image with or a seismic slice with a lot of fractures, but we can extend it in 3 dimensions. This protocol, this program, it was published in 1995, and then it has been applied to tens and tens of cases, maybe even hundreds. And the technical things I explained in a paper in 98, and I published some papers on it also later to give some other examples. You can see some products, some programs in academic world mostly. They are also presented later on. People start to call it heat maps because they're colored. But normally they don't really apply the same algorithms. They simplify a little bit. But basically, it's nothing secret. Although the tool that I use here is quite specific and has been refined over tens of years. And it actually applies many algorithms more than what can find now on the market. Okay, there is a principle what it is based on, that there is an association of discontinuities, fractures and faults, so let's say a group of fractures and faults. If you see it in the nature, it fills the space with some relationships. But this space, how it fills the space, is depending not on more things together. It depends on where are the fractures and how are they in size and orientation. And these, especially size. And these two parameters, they're not necessarily linked. So it doesn't mean that, you know, the distance they have to each other, the sizes are bigger or smaller. These are just two independent parameters they can just develop independently. And that is the difference with FPDM, with many other software tools you can find on the market, because they normally try to link these parameters to generate fractal patterns, etc. So basically what we do here is we just analyze what we see. We don't suppose there is a specific model. We just look at how it looks, how it is, and present it, what is there. Okay, so what the input is are like 2D slices of 3D seismic or outcrops or geological maps or satellite images. The output is our maps of density and orientation. Okay, it is a software code. Good. So what does it do? We take all these data, anything we have. In this case, we took the geological maps of the area. And we look at the orientation and the length and the height and the size. So we do mathematical analysis of the two things. And then we use this to go over the map and do calculations, and then we create things, and we go into detail on this, like the codified trace map, orientation and density, domains, and we can make three-dimensional models of it. So we analyze the data. And then as an output, we give grids and models and maps. Sometimes we can do some additional analysis on special image logs or seismic reprocessing, not in this case, 3D CT scan, anything we can, which helps us to understand the fracture network on the different scales, we can use to put in, but we work with what we have. Okay, and as an example, you have this kind of outputs. This is just, let's say, the general idea of the methodology. Okay, let's go quick and let's look at what we did in this case. Okay, first of all, I would like to emphasize that what we have here is just, tools that are commonly available on the market. Not all of them free, but they are available. So we don't need to have some sort of a specific software package to do this. And what is coming out is also files that can be generally used anywhere we like, in GIS, in Google, in CAD. I just take an example here, Petrel, like what people in oil and gas like to use, but let's say, and different software that is used on the market. Just say the formats and the tools that are being used are standard. To do FPDM, you don't need to have something like, you don't need to buy a software. You need the code. But the software packages, you can use anything available on the market to do your preparation, look at your data. You can, what is the output is in the standard format. Okay, in this case, and here is my dear friend Hassan, he helped me. We collected papers on this area. You see them listed here. Here I have the 13 papers I used in this case. Hassan helped me a lot, of course, because myself I cannot read Turkish, but I try to understand what the papers are about. And here you see on the map, you see the outline of the areas that these papers have tackled. And what we do is I mapped everything that was faults and fractures and zones and thrusts and anything that was a tectonic discontinuity, which was mentioned and mapped in these papers. So this is just a question of collecting and make it a unification and a digitalization of the available data. You can see the work is distributed over maybe 25 years of people that have been studying this area. I apologize if somebody sees some papers that are not represented. This is of course the time frame that was dedicated to this study. You can also see some additional information, like these are the cones of volcanic features which I was interested in adding to this model. So there are something like a few hundred or maybe even a few thousand cones to understand if this maybe has also some sort of relation with the seismic activity. Okay. So first step, we do the length analysis. So we see here on the left, this is the lineament database. So we have 1,335 faults that have been mapped by people, 6,000 segments. Here you see how there's the length distribution of these data. This is inverse cumulative. So here we see the number of fractures of faults that are bigger than the one that is represented here. So here there are many small and a few bigger. So you already see the way this is mathematically distributed. So we try to plot it in double logarithmic scale on the right here, log plots. And then we see here on the base, focus on this one. This is where we see a part of it is distributed on the straight line. This is, let's say, the window that we are looking at that shows us actually the representative section of the data. This is on the top here, you see a graph that helps us to understand where is the cutoff of this slope. And probably if we zoom in and we would go and look at all the smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller features, we would slowly follow this trend line upwards up to the level of single smaller fractures. But this, of course, you can understand, then we are looking at billions and trillions in this same area. So this is sort of the representative part of the data, and here you see the mathematical relationship of this length distribution. Then let's take a look at the orientation distribution. Here on the left, you see rosette diagrams. Deliberately, I always represent it in, let's say, in this 5 example ways of plotting them, because there is no specific rule to use in this rosette diagrams to be sure that the sets you recognize are statistically significant. There is some software and some papers published on this, but this is sort of, I plot them in different ways to understand that the sets that I decide to make, to define, that I can actually sort of in the different ways that I plot can be recognized. So you see different bin sizes. You can see if we weight them for the whole lines or just put all the single segments. Etc. And it is a little bit a question of feeling which one of these diagrams you like more, but it is important that we can try to recognize the sets. Okay, these are 9 sets I defined with a different color code, and then we apply this color code to the map, and then we get what we need, what we call a codified trace map. And that is sort of a map that shows where different orientations in the different areas are represented. It is a nice way of visualizing what is happening in the area and to show also the heterogeneity. Okay, so we have sizes and orientation, and then the next step we do is we try to plot this. You see? Yeah. Okay. So we try to analyze this in the whole area. So we define a grid with a certain density. Let's say for each kilometer we want to have values, a search radius, amounts of iterations, a number of, let's say, criteria, mathematical criteria that gives us a good feeling on how the calculation is going to be developed. It depends very much on the heterogeneity of the data and what kinds of, how the distributions are, etc. And the tool, it will help us to define this best we can. So we do calculations of density. So you just see a few examples here zooming in, and of the orientations that can be expected, and you can represent this in different ways. And something which is important that actually most tools we see don't really do this. There are lots of edge effects. So where we have, for example, the borders of the grid, or where you have areas that are not represented by data, maybe large desert areas, we can cut them out, and the software will use specific algorithms to correct for these edge effects. Or even we can fill them and make a prediction for what could be present in areas where we actually cannot look, whereas for some reason no faults have been indicated because simply there was no outcrops. Yeah? Good. Now this is how the methodology works and how it was applied, and let's take a look at some of the results in this area. Okay, so first of all, of course, we have already very interesting this codified trace map, and I want to underline we can visualize this in Google Earth or in ArcGIS. We can load it in, and these are all the faults that people have been mapping. Yeah? And if we accept these 9 sets, but you can play around with this, you can visualize it in this way. Now this is sort of the mapping of the orientation that has been done by the software. We can make this grid finer or wider, but it depends on how the heterogeneity of the data is and how much added value it actually will give us. I see people keep on coming in, but okay. So here we have the result of the orientation mapping. What do we see here? We see here basically, it is a confusing picture sometimes, but here we see with colors indicated for each data point in the grid, what is the prediction of how small-scale faults are oriented, and again shown with the same color bar. So you can already distinguish certain domains where certain fault orientations are dominant. And if we extract from this only the dominant fault orientation, we get something like this, which will show us what is the most probable and most the dominant fractures that will be present in this area. So it is, let's say, it is of course probabilistic. It is depending on what we have available on the knowledge, and so what is the prediction the program makes on what is the most dominant orientation. Here we have the density values on a grid, and then the gridding of this. Obviously, if we use different grid methodologies, so the results will be slightly different. But basically what we see here is in the red colors are the areas where we have a higher density, or let's say the code predicts there are more fractures and faults present, whereas the blue and purple colors are areas where there are less present. Now this can be due to the fact that there were not a lot observed because it was not outcropping or not mapped at all, or less attention dedicated to it over the years. And very important, and I will come back on this, it doesn't mean that there is more rupture or more energy or whatever. It is just the presence of the amount of features that have potential of moving. And here you see it plotted on the map of in red and purple, the faults and the thrusts that have been mapped, and you see also the volcano cones plotted on this image. And here we can overlay it with what is the orientation that was foreseen. So we have sort of a combination of prediction in orientation and prediction in density of features. And here you can see it plotted on the topographic map. Of course, we can go and zoom in each area and see what is in detail predicted, and then try to understand better. But this is the area that I decided to do the calculations on, and where we had the data available. So let's do, it was just one comparison, and I will come back to this. For example, with I found this damage map that was presented in one of the reports. Okay, so again, it doesn't mean that where we have more features available there will be more damage, because damage is of course linked to many different aspects. apart from the fact that it's of course very much linked to where is the epicenter of the earthquake, etc., etc. The mapping we have been doing is not considering where earthquakes have occurred. So here we can start to look into this and to evaluate and try to link it in some way. So, last picture of the results is just a little bit one step further. This is a module that generates three-dimensional features using the observed data with a number of input parameters, which could be a next step in the study if we like to examine the features and maybe bring them in tools that examine propagation of energy or stress in the area. But it was not really the argument of this study, the focus of this study. So, conclusions, of course. Output is a conclusion in itself. So let's say the grids, the maps, we can consider this as an outcome of this study. Let's say it's not the fact that we can make these maps, because we know we can make these maps. It is interesting to see that these maps can actually, this technology can actually be applied on this style of maps and give us some results that maybe can give us an understanding. Some words on the what it general conclusions of this exercise. Okay, so we have this information available and we can extract it from what has been done. So we have density distributions of the outcropping in the mapped faults. We can make orientation distributions, so the heterogeneity can be visualized. So this is in itself can be used as a scale independent predictive feature. Okay, of course this needs a number of verifications. So caution. Okay. We can of course only verify with field studies the previous and potential future activation of these faults. So if we look at this map, because okay, we have sort of a distribution over the area. Now we need to have the field data to verify case by case where these faults and fractures have actually been activated. But of course, again, this depends on the type of information we have available, on the type of studies we can do, and where we have actually possibility to observe these fractures and faults in certain periods and their activity. And another caution, of course, you can understand it by yourself. This is all very highly dependent on the quality and the coverage of the geological studies. These studies have been done over a long period of time. Some people focus on very small areas, other people on larger areas, etc. So let's say generally the FPDM as an exercise, because it looks at the probabilistic distribution of the features, it sort of filters out anomalies that can be there, or things that have been interpreted by more authors in the same way, or by only a few authors. But of course we cannot use this methodology to test or do QC on these data. So we can always think of new studies become available, add them to the map, and just rerun the same calculation. There is no problem with this. Okay, way forward. What can be done, and what can be how can we use this in the future? Okay, so we need, of course, always, like in all areas, like quality improvement. We need maybe to QC everything which went into this study. We can try to add data from new mapping exercises. Okay, we can do comparison of this with the field studies. So we can take a look at this map and then say, where do we have studies in the field of certain ruptures, and see how to calibrate this. Then we can, of course, do numerical correlations with ground motion, surface displacement, intensity. So let's say use this as a grid, as a numerical grid, and then correlate with observations that have been done for certain earthquake events. That is like a numerical exercise. And then we can imagine in the future maybe to do also numerical simulations using finite element or discrete element methods on the 3D features to see how we can predict how energy is absorbed in this network when certain events happen in the subsurface. Well, this is more or less what I would like to show you. Thank you very much. Again, I would like to underline papers on these kinds of exercises. You can download them. You are free to contact me to know more. We can do other pilot studies, and I am happy and honored to be, let's say, here and give this contribution to this area and to the maybe in a certain way also to the people that are involved in these events. Thank you very much. Time for questions.
Yes, thanks so much, Jan-Pieter. It was very interesting. Actually, yeah, we can have questions. Any questions? Please go ahead. Ask your questions to Jan-Pieter.
Let's see.
Türkçe'de sor istersen.
Bir soru var mı?
So I think people that are online, they can use the chat maybe to ask questions. I can imagine that it is not something we have done before. Many people didn't see it. In other, maybe in subsurface study, people are a little bit used to see this kind of maps. So if you would like to know more, feel free. I see.
Yes, Savaş wants to ask the questions.
Okay, you can maybe translate them for me.
Sesi Özgecan burada mısın?
Buradayım başkanım. Seslerini açabiliyorlar katılımcılarımız.
O zaman Selami hocam ses açık. Yani,
tamam. Benimki de açık.
Şimdi açıldı. Şimdi açıldı.
Tamam.
Hi.
The voice was not able to be opened, so they turned it on.
Okay.
May I ask a
Yes.
question here?
Yes, go ahead, Savaş Bey.
Okay. Hassan Hocam, hi. And we know each other from the seismic cruise in Black Sea, by the way. And I hope you are doing well, by the way. And I would like to ask something about that. I'm a marine geophysicist. I'm seismics, general study on marine seismic 2D data. And do you, depending on your data you show here, and
Yeah.
I especially interested in the marine part. Can you or do you suggest any place to do some 2D or 3D seismic around there, or especially I mean that the continuation of the faults under the sea?
Yes, of course. Well, let's put it like this. I think there is some 2D seismic, of course, in this area, I imagine. Okay, this area is very big. It is not only Turkey, there's also Syria and some other little pieces of Iran. But so I know and I think there is 2D seismic available. I don't think there is a 3D seismic. So let me put it like this. If we look at 2D seismic, and I am sure that people have done this work and looked at some 2D seismic lines, you could imagine you get a fault network from your 2D seismic. You could try to make it. If you have 3D seismic, of course you have much more sophisticated images of the subsurface. So the seismic, of course, is a different, let's say, it is another window in the sizes of the things you can observe. So you can add this to the model and have more so for example your fault maps from seismic, or if you have 3D seismic, you can actually go on a smaller scale in a smaller area because you see smaller things continuously.
Yeah.
Of course, geological maps that are used in this study, they have of course many gaps because you cannot map in some areas faults. So you will always have a heterogeneous pattern, and the mapping just smooths it out and try to fill it and make a prediction for where you did not have the geological map made. In a 3D seismic it works different because you have, for example, for a small 3D seismic, you have continuous information. So normally in fact this technology, it was developed originally for 3D seismic data. So you see the slices, and then you do this mapping on the slices. You get also three-dimensional images from this. So what we do here, we transport it to something which is geological map. So let's say if there was a 3D seismic survey, of course this would give you much more information. You could put another window in the information and make the model much more sophisticated for the area where the 3D seismic would be.
Okay.
But honestly, I don't think, maybe somebody has more information. I don't think there is 3D seismic in this area. Maybe, I think only 2D lines, and with the 2D lines, of course, you can make the fault grid. So you can have some areas where now below desert, whatever, where you would have more information. It would make the model more,
exactly. Thank you very much for this.
Good. So if you have any 3D seismic you would like to apply, feel free to send me a mail and I will show you.
Okay, thank you very much. In the future, I hope there will be 3D seismic, very neat.
Okay.
They are very necessary for this area. The 3D seismic is very important. Do you mean the 3D seismic about the 3D morphology, sea bottom morphology, or do you mean the deep 3D seismic? Which one?
Any.
Maybe both of maybe you
both.
say.
Yeah, any. You can let's say we can use it on the sea bottom, of course, like deformation of the sea bottom.
Exactly.
Or we can go in a little bit smaller. You can take the ultra high density seismic for stability. We do it in engineering. In fact, I'm working on a project in Italy for this with the ultra high density. So you can say we go in very small scale, but only where we need to understand the stability in the subsurface. So it may be 500 meters or 1 kilometer. Or we do it for deep 3D seismic for reservoir studies, etc. In fact, the point is that the mapping, you can say, for example, where it is highly density or certain orientations. It also gives you an idea of the heterogeneity and the connectivity of the system. You can see it as a positive if you need something that is flowing in the reservoir, for example, for the subsurface. But you can also see it in a negative way. It's compartmentalizing, for example, in clastic sediments. We also use it for plastic.
Exactly.
Where you have the damage zones and make many small compartments. And this tool, it helps you to understand how these compartments are distributed in the space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much for this knowledge.
Good.
I really appreciate it. Maybe in the future.
Please, feel free to.
I hope that.
Teşekkürler Savaş Bey. Any question else?
Feel free to discuss about it in Turkish between you, and if you want to ask some question, maybe Hasan can translate for me. Don't worry.
Sure, no problem. Başka sorusu olan var mı? So if not,
ben bir soru sormak istiyorum. I'm sorry. I congratulate you. Your nice speech is very inclusive and large of work, I believe. It's a quite work. Thank you. First, I would like to take your attention to prediction of the earthquakes, if possible. Can you deduce anything out of it with your lineations and fractures? And a long time ago, I had witnessed prediction studies of earthquake with Russian guys, especially hydrogeologist Vartanian. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name.
Yeah.
He's now in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, and he has worked. He's hydrogeologist, and he has worked with aquifer levels, underground levels, and pressure zones of plates, which incline or shows the direction of stress. Therefore, it was very easy to detect or to predict earthquake times or earthquake features. So, can you say anything about that? That's my question, first question. And the second, you implied coal occurrences with your features. I don't know if I'm wrong, but how do you come up with your features, including oil and coal potential of the areas?
Okay, good. So yeah,
what do you input? What do you input in it? Probably three-dimensional seismic works can help you, but
oh, there are many implications. Let's say first the question of prediction of the earthquake. Yes, I think actually I did not want to talk too much about this because predicting the earthquake is a very sensible topic. It's very, how can you say, very exciting sort of thing to talk about, and there are many discussions. But so I don't want to interfere too much in this discussion.
They improved that.
Yes. Okay. So I think basically we must see this methodology that I have here as something that is, we have very much knowledge on the area. Okay. Many people have worked on this area. And what I am doing here is try to bring it all together, to give it value of everybody, the input of everybody. You see what I mean? So it is a way of calculating what do we now know of this area if we give everybody's work the credit. So we just don't take in one method. So we put all the knowledge in one system. And we take out, let's say, it is a sort of it is part of what we call the guided artificial intelligence, because this is a guided artificial intelligence. We tell the tool what he needs, what are the rules he needs to apply, and he gives us sort of an image of this rule, so of this reasoning. So it is something to zoom out to say what is now the knowledge. So if you look at all these density and orientation distributions. Of course, this gives us some idea of what is the texture and how the stress, if we project this in the subsurface, where is the features in this area present. So if we put a stress, that is what I mentioned by the last slides with the 3D models. If you can, this is how the stress will sort of be distributed in the area. Okay, so the better we understand this, using all this information from all the people, the better maybe we can understand how the stress is dissipating and also released. But I think this is only the first step. We have to go maybe deeper in the subsurface and understand how these densities and orientations, how they are actually evolving in the subsurface. We must sort of try to also have an idea on this. This is just sort of the surface map. So, but I think it is the first step on having a much more sophisticated three-dimensional model. So I agree on this first part. And if we have sort of a modeling of the subsurface of all the smaller features, like what we call a discrete DFN, discrete fracture network or fault network in the subsurface. I have been working on this for many years, but on smaller scales and on other things. So I think, yes, this could be sort of a path we can go and get more sophisticated modeling on the stress evolution in the subsurface. And this can help on understanding how the subsurface then develops, and maybe give us better understanding. But I don't want to tell it. Now to tell them we can predict earthquakes, absolutely not.
It will be a help in the future.
So the second question was economic. Yes, of course, we use this tool already in the oil and the gas for many years to predict the presence of hydrocarbons. And for example, in this case, I am working with some projects in Australia for mining. We can, of course, understand how the texture of the faults and also the mineralizations along these faults, where they can be. Yes, but of course, then we have to combine it with all the geological maps and the presence of certain lithologies, etc., etc. And this is, but yes, we use it in economic predictions. Yes, for the oil and the gas in this case. And now there is the same way of applying it for especially geothermal studies, for the fluids in the subsurface. This is very important. Yeah.
What instrument else do you use besides fracture distribution?
Yeah. What do we use besides this?
Yeah.
Sorry.
What instrument besides these fractures do you use?
Let's say in this case, the instruments, they are the logs, logs in cores in the subsurface, and for subsurface studies, seismic, seismic, log, and cores. But let's say we can go on the surface, and the same way we have, let's say, radar images and small cores, geotechnical cores, and small
seismic,
small logs, small image logs in 100 or 200 meter boreholes, like we do in mining. So let's say the data sets are similar for the deeper subsurface as well as for the surface. Although in geotechnical studies we don't use a lot. Sometimes we don't use a lot of log data, for example. Sometimes they are not well understood.
Thank you very much, sir.
Teşekkürler Selami Bey. So I think we took too much time. We scheduled for half an hour, but we are over time.
Yeah.
But I have just quick questions to summarize your presentation, Jan-Pieter.
Please.
So what you present here collects a lot of scientific study together, and with more input, and use your special softwares, your tools, multiple tools like Google Earth, AutoCAD, Petrel, and many other disciplines. You combine all data together, and then finally generate a map.
Yeah.
The map, when we apply this map in the earthquake zone in Turkey, Maraş area, and then we notice that there's some risky zone, red colors. That is the more fracture zone, more faulted zone, more damage zone.
Yeah.
So this, in a view of earthquake risk mapping, this area can be highlighted, for the, the people who wants to live for building cities, constructions. So this area will be more risky. Yeah. The next step, your study, I think, is there's a gap. It can be fulfilled with more informations. We can tie with the accumulation of the stress and then stress releasing. How we can monitor it? You need to apply the tremor shock of the recent earthquake activities, to your model. So where is the more stress accumulated and when is the release? So stress accumulation and stress releasing and plus damage zone. So it's going to create a more risky map for the people, for the earthquake risking, So it's been more clear that this area definitely is very risky for the further, if you want to build a city, if you want to build a factory, if you want to build a dam, whatever, or a nuclear power plant, something like this. So that will help the future projects to clarify their objectives, So I think this will help them. And thank you so much. And if you have anything else to, after my talk, you can add, feel free to add, and then we can close it.
Yes.
Hasan Bey, şimdi sen
Evet,
İngilizce
Hüseyin.
şey yaptın.
Türkçesini anlatayım. Şimdi-
Janpieter'e özet verdin, bize özet vereceksin.
Tamam, size özetim. Şimdi Türkçesini şunu anlattım. Dedim ki işte birçok Türkçe yayınlardan ve yayınlanmış datalardan collect ettiğiniz, bir araya getirdiğiniz datalardan siz farklı tool'lar kullandınız. İşte Google Earth kullandı, AutoCAD kullandı, Petrel kullandı, bir sürü software kullandı ve bunları kullanaraktan bir model elde etti ve bu modelde de işte özellikle o Maraş civarındaki o deprem bölgesinde bir risk haritası elde etti. Dikkat edersen
Evet.
kırmızı zonlar ve pembe
Evet.
zonlar elde etti. Dolayısıyla ben dedim ki bu kırmızı zonları biz eğer algılamak istiyorsak bir deprem riski açısından, yani yerleşim yeri olarak düşünüyorsak burası çok riskli bölgeler. Pembe yerler biraz daha az riskli yerler. Eğer buralarda büyük projeler yapılacaksa, işte nükleer santraller olsun, barajlar olsun, ondan sonra işte yerleşim yerler olsun, bu kırmızı alanlar kesinlikle yüksek riskli bölgeler olarak düşünebilir. Ama bu risklere bu sadece elde ettiği inputlarla elde ettiği data. Ama bir de unuttuğu bir şey var. Orası aktif bir fay zonu ve belli dönemlerde stres accumulation, stres birikimi oluyor ve belli dönemlerde de depremlerle biz bu stresi ne yapıyoruz? Release ediyoruz. Yani bu stres açığa çıkıyor. Dolayısıyla stres birikimi ve stres enerjinin açığa çıkmasını da eğer kullandığı software, kullandığı haritalarla entegre ederse daha sağlıklı bir risk haritası elde etmiş oluruz ki, tamam mı? Bu da ileride biz işte yapacağımız projelerde Türkiye açısından söyleyeyim, oradaki yerleşim yeri açısından bize çok büyük bir o projelerde katkı sağlayacağını düşünüyorum demiştim.
Bir sonraki deprem için belki de çok önemli şeyler olacak. Bilgiler
Tabii.
bunlar.
Tabii nerede
Bölgedeki.
ne kadar çok enerji birikimi ve enerji açığa çıkıyorsa, dolayısıyla bu da beraberinde bir damage zone, yani fazla riskli, fazla hasarlı bölgeler getirecektir. Bu da ilerideki projeler için de çok büyük katkı sağlayacaktır diye.
Evet. Hasan Bey, aslında benim bir sorum vardı. Bir harita gösterdi. Orada da özellikle ivme değerleri vardı. Böyle yani o ivme değerlerini bizim bu AFAD'ın istasyonlarından mı aldı, yoksa hangi istasyonlardan aldıklarını merak ettim. Öyle bir harita göstermişti.
Hangi ivme değeri?
Bir ivme değer haritası gösterdi. Bir böyle sıfır, mesela diyelim ki
Yuvarlak
Maraş
yuvarlak
bölgesi.
şeyler vardı böyle toplanan şeyler.
Hani böyle
Sıfır noktalı değerler vardı. Acceleration
sıfır nokta bilmiyorum işte 5G gibi veya öyle, yani
Onlar
veya
sanırım
0.8 G'ler vardı orada.
o ilk ikinci haritasıydı. Onlar NASA'dan falan almıştı sanırım.
Yani onu nereden almış? Çünkü bazı yerlerde ivme değerleri bizim haritanın üstünde çok üstüne çıktı. Özellikle Hatay'da, Maraş'ın bazı bölgelerinde böyle siyah nokta vardı. Muhtemelen böyle Maraş, Antep arasındaki ova bölgesine muhtemelen düşüyor diye tahmin ediyordum. Oralar mı böyle daha yüksek? Yani böyle biraz hızlı geçti. Çok şey yapamadım. Ama
Olmak lazım.
özellikle yapı üretim süreçleri için son derece önemli bir harita olduğunu düşünüyorum. Yani
Dur, o slide'ı açtırayım onu. Ondan sonra üzerine slide
tabii
üzerine sorunuzu soralım.
şeydeki, yani öyle ivme değerlerini gösterdiği bir harita vardı. Bir, bu ivme değerlerini nereden almış? Yani bizim hangi istasyonlardan, daha doğrusu hangi veri tabanından almış? İkincisi, şeyle match etme şansı olmuş mu? Böyle hasar dağılımı ve bu ivme değerler arasında bir korelasyon yapma şeyi olmuş mu yani? Çok hızlı geçtiği için şey yapamadım orayı. Biraz da seri konuşuyor ve biz az anladık
tamam.
ya da.
Slaytları yavaş yavaş kesin. Siz hangi harita olduğunu bana söyleyin, orada şey yapalım.
Sen ivme değerlerini gösteren harita dersen o bilir.
İvmenin İngilizcesi neydi onu bilmiyorum.
acceleration.
Acceleration.
Acceleration.
Janpieter, can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
So one of your maps shows the acceleration values of the earthquakes. So they are asking, where did you get this data, the source of this data?
Oh, which one? Let me see if I can still.
Can you share your slides with us?
G values, there were accumulation and zonation of
Absolutely. 1 second. I will find it. Yeah. I think one of the slides I showed about the earthquake, the knowledge. This one. Let me do. I will share it with you. This one you mean?
Hüseyin Bey bu mu?
Yok, bu değil. Bu bizim bu yer çekimi ivmesine bağlı şeyler vardı. Bu değil. Hayır, bunlar değil.
Can you go to next one, Jan-Pieter?
Evet. Böyle ortalara doğru bir şeydi. Yok. Bunlar daha başlangıç kısmı.
Next.
Yok. Yani ortalara doğruydu.
Next, Jan-Pieter, next.
Yeah. No, this one. This is my maps.
Next one, please.
go much further.
Yeah, I will go down. This was just a methodology. Yeah, let me walk through it.
Devam hocam.
This one?
No.
Dur yok. Devam hocam. Bir sonraki. Dağdır. Yok. Yok. Bir sonraki. Yok. Result kısmında olabilir. Devam.
Go, please.
This one?
No.
Yok. Bir tane daha herhalde bir. Daha sonra.
One more.
That's it.
Dağdır.
That's
Oh,
Yok,
this one. This one.
This one, yes.
Yeah. Sorry. This is from a report, a damage study. I found. Let me see. I think I have the
source.
The source. No, I have it in my database. Sorry, guys. I didn't write it here. Normally, I write it somewhere on the slide, but I have it in my database. It is from a report on damage.
Hüseyin Bey, siz bu haritadaki değerler, sizdeki
Evet,
mevcut
yani
değerler
bu haritadaki
This is energy release for the different stations and damage, different type of damage on buildings. Let's say the color is not really the amount of damage, it's the type of damage that was observed in the field. It is from a field study, a report from, I think, I have it. If you like, I can send it to you, no problem. I have it in my database. I found it in maybe the World Bank or maybe even from the, I suppose it is with collaboration with the Turkish Geological Survey, but I can send the PDF.
Hüseyin Bey, raporu size gönderebilirim diyor PDF olarak. Evet. Aldığı kaynağı.
Yok, buradaki yani ivme değerlerini gösteren istasyonlar var. Yani bu bizim AFAD'ın mı yoksa Kandilli Rasathanesi'nin mi veya işte farklı kuruluşlardan mı alınmış onu tam bilmiyorum ama bu önemli çünkü yapı üretim süreçlerini tabii yani yapıların karşılaştıkları ivme değerlerini göstermesi açısından son derece önemli. O yüzden ben merak etmiştim. Yani orada da haritalanmış çok güzel bir şekilde. Muhtemelen yani eğer doğruysa şeyle örtüşüyor mu? Yani oradaki yüzey hasar dağılımı ile örtüşüyor mu? Onu soracaktım. Ama herhalde bir yayından aldığını ifade etti.
Hüseyin'ciğim, o şeyler, o şekiller hasar cinsini gösteriyor.
You can see this.
Evet.
This is the intensity in G. So
şeyler, o binaların renkleri belki gösterebilir. Ama şeyler var ya yani 0 bilmiyorum işte 558G dediği şey İvme değerlerini gösteriyor. İvme değerlerini merak ettim. Yani onun veri kaynağını nereden temin etmiş, öyle haritalamış. Ben çünkü karşılaşmamıştım daha önce haritayla da bir yayından mı almış? Muhtemelen bir yayından aldı, anlaşıldı.
Bir rapordan aldığını söyledi. Onu sizinle paylaşırım falan dedi.
Tamam,
o raporu.
tamam.
Okay.
Teşekkür ediyorum Hasan Bey, sağ olun.
Rica ederim. Ben teşekkür ederim.
Thank you for
Adam
Janpieter.
pek anlamadı ama şey kaldı. Mr.
So,
Ford,
Janpieter, the same base wants to clarify that there's some number on this map, the last one, the one you mentioned, the damage report. Some values 0.7, 0.8, and or this number, he says the source of this data may not match with the AFAT values or Kandilli values. He just has curiosity about the source of this data. How reliable this data is that?
Yeah, but let's say that for me it is not, let's say it is just one example of how we maybe can make a future comparison. I'm not using this for the rest. It is just, let's say, to say, okay, we can try to make a comparison now, but I just take one example of a map. I'm not evaluating too much this map. So it was just to show how we can make a next step if we have more information on damage or type. You know what is important in the maps that the FPDM makes? It is also giving you the orientation of how the features are in certain areas. So you can sort of say, okay, here we expect that there will be damage in this direction or more in this direction, like the fault, how they are. So you can use this, for example, we are doing this in Italy, you can use this to project better in your engineering, and also your shaking, type of, I'm not familiar with the different engineering terms, but they need a specific input to make the building safer. So let's say that is what I mean by these kinds of maps. It is not that it's nothing that it is a sacred map or something like this. Each time you know more, you put it in your system and you recalculate. It is just a concentration of the knowledge, everything you have done over many, many years. What is the implication of it? What is the deeper? There is something inside this information you can get out and show. And then you can say, start to use it and confront it with the type of damage that you see or in certain areas. So, and the energy and ground shaking. But again, this is for one earthquake, the map is for the whole area. So let's say all the fractures and the faults we see in geology, of course they are the results of millions of years of fracturing and shaking and faulting, etc. And they are just reactivated in the recent earthquakes, so the potential activation of these features. Some of them maybe have never been activated in our lifetime, but they are there. They can be activated in an earthquake, or they have been active in the past where we don't have any information, but they are. You can see where they are.
Yep. Thank you so much for clarifications, for nice presentations, and then it's a new tool. Okay, and good luck for your new tool in the further projects.
Yes.
And I hope it will contribute to the Turkish Geological Society for Turkish geologists. Yeah. Also, we are happy to meet with you. I am happy to introduce you to Turkish Geological Society. That's it. Hope to see you next another presentation, inshallah.
Yes, I'm happy to share this with the Turkish Geological Survey to give them the files. So maybe you can also look at it. Maybe you can have a platform where you can examine them. If there is any way we can I discussed with my colleagues. We have no problem of sharing this with because this is a study we did to contribute, not to.
Sure.
We can publish scientifically this study, but it is more important we give it available to the Turkish geological community. So if I have a way of maybe transporting it to the Geological Society or to the Geological Survey, so I'm sure they are conducting studies now, and we can add this information for them.
Sure. Thank you so much. Hüseyin Bey size bırakıyorum sözü.
Çok
Kapanışta
teşekkür ediyorum.
konuşmasını.
Thank you for
For
Janpieter, Mr. Janpieter, for presentation. Arkadaşlar hepinize iyi akşamlar diliyorum. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.